Hi, Irfan. Thank you very much for joining us today. How are things in Vancouver?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for asking, Jimmy. Things are going really well.
So Horizon Copper recently provided a number of asset updates within its portfolio. And the first one I want to discuss with you is Antamina. It's the third largest copper mine in the world, and it's located in Peru. And it's also a cash flowing asset. But what exactly was the news that came out on Antamina?
Yeah, pretty significant news coming out of Antamina in the last while. One of the things that we've been telling people about is how we think this is going to be, an asset that's going to be cash flowing for many, many years to come, decades in fact. And more recently, they put out some information saying that their modified EIA just got approved, which means essentially that they now have plans to go into 2036 in terms of mining as part of their base case. And that's pretty significant, knowing that you get the permits to do more mining on their open pit, and it isn't somewhat constrained by in terms of resources. This is an asset that we think will be cash flowing for many years beyond that, and it's wonderful to have it as a cornerstone asset in our portfolio. That's kind of the high level headline news. But I think what some people didn't appreciate until you started looking into the MEIA was the fact that they also contemplated moving an expansion on the throughput. So going from 150,000 tons per day to over 200,000 tons per day. And that's pretty significant, where you can increase that throughput by close to 30 to 40%. And that means, and if that gets in place and once it's operating effectively, that's tremendous amount of additional cash flow coming in earlier to Horizon shareholders, which is great news. So we're really happy to see that.
So you raise a very good point about the size of this mine, and I just want to reinforce this for our viewers. The mineral reserves at Antamina is 226 million tons at 0.94% copper. M&I is 673 million tons. So it's just a massive asset.
Yeah, and that M&I is exclusive of reserves. So it is one of these assets that we think is in cash flowing for a super long time. And that's the nice thing about associating yourself with world quality assets. Like Antamina is the third largest copper mine in the world on a copper equivalent basis. And when you associate yourself with these quality assets, you find ways that the assets continue to grow, cash flow gets reinvested into it, there's more exploration results. And these are things that when it costs so little to actually mine, the cash flow delta on it and the margins are quite considerable, so you reinvest back into that asset. And the nice thing about having our MPI royalty is we don't actually have to have a cash outlay. We just get a check on a quarterly basis, which is nice.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because with the expansion of the open pit and also the tailings facilities, what's the CapEx on this?
Yeah, so Teck, one of the operators of that mine, it's owned by like Glencore, BHP, Mitsubishi, and Teck. And so Teck put out some news indicating that they expect over the next 8 years, there's about $2 billion that'll be spent. So it'll be spent over a course of a decade. But the nice thing about how we have it structured, we don't actually have to go write a check, unlike if you're a partner as part of owning an asset. You actually have to go write your portion of that CapEx. We don't have to go write that check. That gets paid over the course of the life of the mine as an MPI, and so we just sit back and cheer them on and put out replication of the good news that Teck does, and collect the cash as copper prices go up as well.
And just to reinforce this point, the operators are going to spend $2 billion over 8 years, and Horizon Copper does not put up 1 cent.
That's right. We don't write a check for any of that. We just get quarterly cash payments. Now, an MPI works is this portion of your operating expenses based on what is your revenue, what are your operating expenses, and we get that net amount. But the great thing about having an asset that's very low cost, one of the low cost copper mines in the world, is you get tremendous margin. So if you believe in the copper price, you believe that it'll be higher in the long run than it is today, you just get that incremental margin over time, over the next decade, which is wonderful. And what we believe will be multi-decades.
Yeah, and so the copper price is currently trading around $8,800 a ton, and I've seen research reports out of Goldman Sachs, Citi, and also JP Morgan. They think it's going to go significantly higher by 2025. I think I've seen reports as high as $15,000 a ton, so that's a massive move.
Yeah, that would be incredible, and you know, you can see why some of these very reputable banks are indicating why they believe the copper price will be higher. I don't think it's any surprise, but to people who are in the mining industry, who follow closely, in the sense that it is really hard to actually build mines. You know, the supply deficit that's coming, and even assets that have been, you know, talked about for the last decade still haven't been built. It just takes a tremendous amount of effort getting your permits in place and moving projects forward. So we're really excited that we have Antamina in our portfolio. The other thing to keep in mind that I think sometimes gets lost in the equation when people look at, you know, copper price and the assets that you have, you want an asset that lasts for many, many years, because the copper price, you know, if you've got an asset that lasts for 5 to 10 years, you know, you might miss the window when copper goes on a tear, or the cash flows associated with that those years may not be as significant. When you've got an asset that goes for many decades, that's when you get the real value popping up in terms of copper price appreciation.
So, and maybe you could just touch on like this mine is cash flowing now, but how much does Horizon Copper receive from Antamina?
Yeah, so we get a check on a quarterly basis based on the production at the underlying mine, and so based on prices about 380 copper, if you look at pounds instead of metric tons, like 8,800, you're looking about 10 to 15 million dollars US on an annual basis that Horizon gets on average. That's net of any of the streams or royalties, how we've acquired the asset. That's actual cash flow attributable to Horizon shareholders. So copper prices go higher, your incremental cash flow goes higher significantly as well. And that doesn't take into account the throughput expansion that I talked about earlier.
And Horizon Copper has another indirect interest in another world-class copper mine, and that's Rio Tinto's OT mine, which is located in the country of Mongolia. Maybe you can just touch on the indirect interest in this mine through your ownership of Entrée Resources.
Yeah, so we own 25% of Entrée Resources. They trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange. If you just look at our look-through value of what our 25% is worth, just on marketable securities, it's about 60 million US, which is greater than our market cap today. That entity, Entrée, has a finance carried interest on a portion of the Oyu Tolgoi ground. And so we own 25% of that company. The other major shareholder is Rio Tinto. So we're the two major shareholders of that entity itself. And we're really excited about it because this is an asset that in the last year, you know, there's been news coming out of it where before it hasn't won. They've done the drawbells. They're, you know, moving forward the underground mining. Historically, it's been an open pit operation. Now it's moved to underground mining. And that's where, you know, the work and efforts required to put in the capex and move it forward, and that's been spent getting a lot of that work done. And now it's more of a function of time before they move on to the Hugo North extension, which is essentially the portion that we have our finance carried interest in. So, you know, a couple of years' time is when they start, you know, mining on that ground, from what we understand. And so we're really excited to have another one of these world-class assets in our portfolio.
And so why don't you just made mention of the fact that you're hoping to receive, I guess, cash flow from this asset in a couple of years, but maybe just back up a little bit. When will the development work start on this asset?
Yeah, so a lot of that work has been going on. So there's, and I'll get into a little bit of technical in terms of nomenclature, but there's something called Lift 1, Panel 1, that includes the Hugo North extension. That mine design has been completed. So that work has been done. That improves stability and construction and operability of that asset. But then the first Hugo North extension development work is expected to happen later this year, so the second half of 2024. And what they're doing is they're establishing, panel 1, Western Ore, kind of like the handling and the truck chute. And then the next kind of component in the second half of this year is also the commissioning of shaft 3 and 4. So those are kind of like immediate things that'll be happening on the development side in 2024. And then also, when you add on the fact that we're expecting an updated Hugo North resource model for both lifts 1 and 2, I think that's another good kind of re-rating event that we hope for Rio and then Entrée to publicly announce when available.
And production will start in 2027.
We anticipate production, so mining on that portion of the Entrée ground in 2027.
Irfan, the last asset I want to inquire about is Hot Maden, which is a copper gold project in Turkey. SSR Mining is also the operator of this asset. And recently, SSR Mining had a very unfortunate accident in Turkey. Maybe you can just touch on that and also what the ramifications are for Hot Maden and what this means going forward.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jimmy. As you said, a very unfortunate incident, not related to Horizon or Hot Maden in terms of the asset itself. They had an incident at one of their mines. It was a completely different mine, heap leach operation with cyanide. Two key components that aren't anyway transferable to Hot Maden. There's no cyanide at Hot Maden. There's no heap leach operation. So it's a very simple operation, while the other operation was quite complicated. At the end of the day, I think what it does is it potentially delays the commercial production of the Hot Maden project. And the reason is SSR Mining is going to be focusing over the next couple of months on that other project, making to get through their operations and move forward on it. So it'll take their timeline away from it. In terms of their resources and their focus. And so I think that, people should expect a delay in commercial production by, some people think 6 months. I think, up to a year is a good estimation to take in terms of, how long that delay will impact our project itself. But the other things to keep in mind, this is a project that we believe will definitely get built for the simple fact that it's just world-class. It's incredibly high grade. Some of the grades for gold are, 8.8 grams. That's like the average head grade. And copper is incredibly high as well. So it's an outlier in terms of gold and copper. And it's in a country that's the largest gold producer in all of Europe with, expectations and aims to be in one of the top producing gold countries out there. So there's support behind it. It's a very high quality asset. And even before SSR got involved with the asset, it received its key permits, the EIA and its forestry permit. So, we're pretty confident that this is an asset that is going to move forward and it's going to be cash flowing for many, many years to come.
Good update. And you also made mention of the fact that Antamina is a cash flowing asset. Your other two assets are at the development stage. But because you do have cash flow coming in, how will you allocate that in the coming year? And would you ever consider acquiring another cash flowing asset?
Yeah, it's in a wonderful position to not have to go raise any equity where you're cash flowing, you have your capital available for your projects or you have finance carried interest. So we're in an enviable position. There's a lot of copper companies out there who are just waiting to tap the equity markets a little bit when it opens up so that they can, raise some additional capital and put in their project. And so we do see in our pipeline opportunities available where you can, acquire a minority position or passive interest in an operation that's cash flowing today. But because, I've elected over the last year and a half or so to just take, dollar a year salary, all my returns associated with Horizon Copper are purely equity returns. So when we're looking at transactions to do, for me, it's a really easy test. Will this help increase the share price or not increase the share price? While, some other people, then calculus might be like, do I get bigger so that my salary gets bigger because I've got more operations? So those are the ways we're looking at it. But when you look at our assets today, you got, a world-class asset that's cash flowing today. You've got, Hot Maden, which is fully permitted. which we believe will get moving forward once SSR deals with some of their other issues, or it gets another hands or what have you. And it's world class, so we know that's moving forward. And our third asset in Entrée, that's already in production. It just isn't producing on the Entrée ground. And so you already have this massive amount of growth built into your portfolio already that you don't have to necessarily go buy another cash flowing asset. But we're very inquisitive, and we're doing due diligence, and we'll see if any of them materialize. I don't think a deal is done until you sign anything, but we're looking to add more quality assets in the portfolio like you've seen us do over the last 18 months.
And maybe you can speak to the pipeline, because I'm very curious when it comes to copper assets. I keep reading that everybody's looking for copper, including not only BHP and Rio Tinto, but the gold producers like Newmont and Barrick.
Yeah, copper, when I started, wasn't a precious metal. Now it's becoming more and more precious in some people's minds and trading at a higher multiple. I think that there's a lot of competition to get copper assets. There have been over the last couple of years. And what you see that competition happening at more taking ownership or operating positions in these copper assets. So actually like owning 51% of it at a minimum. We're not looking to do that. The beauty of our business model, and it's relatively new, is we're looking for more minority positions. And the benefit of having those minority positions is you can build out a larger portfolio. You're not putting all your eggs in one asset. You're not, just limited to one jurisdiction. You can have the diversified portfolio, and it doesn't require much more effort. It doesn't require much effort for me to, collect the check from Teck on a quarterly basis. And so you can add to that portfolio. And so I quite like it. And that means the pipeline that we're looking at, there aren't many people who are looking at minority positions. In fact, there aren't many companies that you mentioned that would be interested in buying a minority position. They're looking to operate. We're not looking to operate. We're looking to actually just build that portfolio and get exposure to even better assets and high quality assets than you would in necessarily a junior copper company.
So let's talk about valuation. It's very unique for the reasons that you just mentioned. And you mentioned earlier that because of your interest in Entrée Resources, you own 25% of that, which equates into a value of $60 million. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
So, and this is more than your current market cap of Horizon Copper. So it's trading at a huge discount.
Yeah, we think we're an incredible buy. I think when you just look at it from just a normal perspective, how do you value it? Do you look at what are the value of the assets? Well, you can look at Antamina, third largest copper mine in the world. You can look at Hot Maden, the quality of that asset and what SSR paid for its interest, and you can value at that basis. If you follow that path on a NAV basis, we're trading at less than half our NAV by a lot. And so you can see, the tremendous value proposition there. You can also look at it from perspective of cash flow. How much are you going to cash flow on a yearly basis? And there's some slides out there on our website that talks about, just based on spot copper prices today, how much you cash flow with these assets. And, you'd be cash flowing essentially your market cap just based on spot prices alone. And that's pretty compelling. And that's just the nature of how we build the company. It's $250 million enterprise value US, but the market cap is a small component of that. The differential is just based on some 10-year debentures with very low interest rates, no financial covenants. You get a tremendous amount of torque, and you get these outsized returns as a result of them as your assets produce and perform. And so I think it's quite compelling, whether or not you look at it from a cash flow perspective or a NAV basis. And as we continue to get the Horizon story name out there, as some of these catalysts that we hope will come out over the next 6 months start getting into the news cycle, I think you're going to see some of that appreciation come.
Irfan, as we wrap up, maybe you can just summarize for investors why they should consider Horizon as an investment and what catalysts they can look forward to from Horizon Copper in the coming months.
Yeah, I think one, you're not going to find a copper story out there below $1 billion market cap that has 3 world-class assets in its portfolio, that's actually cash flowing today, that doesn't need to go raise equity to move its assets forward. I think that's quite enviable. The other thing that I think is quite unique is the leverage point that I mentioned before, of the fact that you get so much torque to the copper story based on how we structured the company. You've got a management team that's incentivized because they put so much of their resources into the stock as well. And over the last 6 months, I've been purchasing shares, insiders have been purchasing shares, because we think it's a great way to ride the copper wave. In terms of catalysts over the next few months, I think one of the things we're focusing on is increasing liquidity, and so we're looking at getting an OTCQX filing out there, so that people in the States can start participating in the story. You're going to see us hopefully put out some more news on credit facilities available to us with chartered Canadian banks, just to provide extra firepower, so people know, hey, these guys don't have to go raise equity to acquire assets or move projects forward. I think that'll be a good news event. I think you're going to get more news on the things that I mentioned with respect to Entrée, as they start publicizing some of those operational developments on that asset. And I think you're going to get great news stories coming out of like Antamina that we just got over the last month or two, on just the expansion of the operations, what they're looking to do. And then finally, while Hot Maden isn't even in our market cap at all, what I think shareholders will benefit from is greater clarity coming out of the operator and the timelines associated with that project. So I think the next 6 months should be quite exciting for Horizon shareholders.
Well, that was a great update and a great overview, and I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today, and I look forward to our next update.
Great, thanks, Jamie.